Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're digging into a massive macroeconomic mystery buried in a pretty fascinating 2021 paper by researchers Sophia and Gunther Schnabl. It's titled Determinants of Japanese Household Saving Behavior. We're going to explore how an entire nation's financial behavior just completely flipped on its head and, what that might mean for the rest of us.
So let's just dive right in by asking a really simple, but honestly incredibly perplexing question about Japan's modern economy. Where did all the savings go? I mean, for decades, the Japanese public had this reputation for saving money that was virtually unchallenged anywhere in the industrialized world.
Seriously, Japan used to be renowned globally as a nation of super savers. Think about this. In the post-World War II era, households were stashing away nearly a quarter of their disposable income. A quarter. But then, shocker. By 2013, their net household saving rate had completely plummeted. It actually went into negative territory, hitting negative 0.6% of GDP. To put that into perspective, that means as a collective, everyday households were literally spending more money than they were taking in. Crazy, right?
The sheer magnitude of this drop-off is basically our macroeconomic crime scene. We're talking about a staggering 80% collapse from their peak in the early 1990s. Trillions, yes, trillions with a T, of yen in expected savings just seemingly vanished into thin air over the course of a couple of decades. Now, what's really fascinating here is the massive contrast between the conventional wisdom everyone just accepts, the usual suspect, if you will, which is an aging population, and the hidden mastermind that most people completely ignore, which is monetary policy. For years, economists have pointed the finger squarely at demographics. But, as Lazaretou and Schnabl's research reveals, there was actually a powerful invisible hand at play.
Let's start with the usual suspect: aging.
To really build our case, we first have to unpack that widely accepted theory. We need to understand why demographics are so frequently and honestly almost entirely blamed for this financial disappearing act. Starting in the 1990s, Japan's productive, working-age population basically hit a brick wall. It began this steady, undeniable decline. And at the exact same time, the elderly dependency ratio just absolutely skyrocketed. The balance of retirees to active workers shifted dramatically.
And, based on the traditional life cycle model of economics, that explanation makes total sense. The literature generally attributes this to the shift to low growth and demographic changes. Because think about it. As a massive group of elderly people retire, they stop saving from their paychecks, right? They start spending down their nest eggs just to survive. It's perfectly logical. But, and this is a big but, as our researchers discovered when they really dug into the data, while aging is for sure a major factor, it is definitely not the whole story.
Which brings us to the hidden mastermind, monetary policy. This is the core thesis of the paper, and honestly, it's where this mystery gets super fascinating. We're talking about the massive, totally under-the-radar impact of the Bank of Japan's prolonged expansionary monetary policy. There is this absolutely stunning correlation that happens over these decades. As the central bank slashed short-term interest rates trying to stimulate a low-growth economy, household savings basically marched in lockstep. They plunged right off the cliff alongside those interest rates.
So we have to ask, how exactly does policy change behavior?
Right. How do these high-level, totally abstract government policies actually translate into kitchen table realities that alter human psychology and behavior? I mean, how does a central bank rate cut literally stop a family from putting money in the bank? Well, the researchers broke this invisible manipulation down into 3 distinct mechanisms, which they call transmission channels. You've got the interest rate channel, the wealth channel, and the redistribution channel. These are basically the pathways the central bank used to actively disincentivize the Japanese people from putting their money away for a rainy day.
Let's start with the most direct factor, the interest rate channel. Historically, Japanese households kept about 50% of their financial wealth in cash and standard bank deposits. Because of that, dropping interest rates to zero was absolutely devastating to savings. The logic here is brutal but simple. The central bank drops rates to zero, bank accounts yield absolutely no return, and boom, the motivation to save just vanishes. It basically proved that if you aren't getting paid to keep your money in the bank, even a deeply ingrained cultural habit of saving can be completely destroyed.
Now that brings us to the redistribution channel, and this one is driven by a really fascinating economic theory known as Ricardian equivalence. I know, it sounds super academic, but it's basically the idea that consumers anticipate future tax increases to pay off current government deficits, which prompts them to save more as a precaution. It's a bit of a counterforce to the interest rate drop, but it's a crucial piece of the puzzle. It suggests that when a government runs up massive debts, everyday citizens actually get pretty spooked.
See, the Japanese government was heavily subsidizing its aging population through these massive Social Security expansions. We're talking about the share of Social Security in the general budget essentially doubling over just a few decades. And unconventional monetary policy basically enabled the government to redistribute all of those resources. So younger generations looked at this surging deficit and realized, uh-oh, we are inevitably going to face higher taxes to pay for all of this. And ironically, that fear triggered some precautionary saving among the youth to brace for that future impact.
So when the authors actually ran all the empirical data through their models to test these channels, the results were incredibly illuminating. The prolonged low interest rates, they resulted in a highly significant decrease in savings. They completely crushed it. Meanwhile, that redistribution channel we just talked about actually pushed savings up a bit out of fear, and rising wealth from asset bubbles increased savings too. But overwhelmingly, that interest rate crash wiped out the core incentive to save. This definitively proves that monetary policy was the hidden mastermind steering the ship all along. Oh, and as a quick aside, changes in labor income turned out to be totally statistically insignificant. Who knew?
So what does this all mean for us? Let's talk about the global warming.
Now you might be sitting there wondering, why does a deep dive into Japanese household finances from the 1990s and 2000s matter to me right now? Why are we analyzing decades-old data? Well, because Japan is literally the canary in the coal mine for industrial nations globally. Their experience serves as a really stark, unavoidable warning. Today, countless industrialized nations across the globe, especially places like the European Union, are facing the exact same dangerous cocktail, a rapidly aging population combined with prolonged ultra-low interest rates. Japan was just the very first to arrive at this destination.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought to ponder. We all really like to think that our financial choices are entirely our own, right? But the next time you log in and look at the balance in your own savings account, ask yourself, are your financial habits truly your own, or are they being invisibly manipulated by the abstract policies of your central bank? Think about it.